Welcome to Hashknife Hangouts. I'm Calen. He's my dad, Brandon. If you're just joining the channel, like, comment, and subscribe. Find us at the links below. And now to today's notes. Remember the Pause Act. We discussed that in May. If you don't, check out the card above. I'll try and add that up here. For any reference to the previous discussion, so you can kind of get caught up. Yeah, it's not quite that way, Dad, but yeah.
Okay.
If you do remember though, it's back. Except this time it isn't Colorado, it's Oregon. Specifically, I'm referring to, it's called, the full name is Initiative Petition 13 or IP13, IP13, whatever you want to call that. So what exactly is the issue with this particular initiative petition? Well, we're about to break it down for you. First, based on how I understand the opposite perspective, and what I'm seeing in the initiative, because I looked at their website, which I'll add the link below. I'll put that below. I'll present the other side's stance before we kind of dive into our own. So here's the argument from after reading through that and kind of looking at some other sources. This is how I understand it, if I'm correct. And let's assume I am, because it's our show. Livestock and the other animals are regularly abused physically and sexually when cared for while performing veterinary care and conducting meat production processes. And this is not just, we focus on beef, but this is also things like sheep and pork. The current slaughtering process causes undue pain and suffering for the animals, and therefore needs to be replaced through natural death processes. This new initiative does not hinder the meat industry. It only adds additional regulations and restrictions. So with that, that's kind of how I understand it, based off the opposite side's perspective. I think now to our perspective, what I did was I used the proponent of IP13, that group. I used their website to analyze their points and make our counter arguments. So essentially, the heading is, what is IP13? And they explain it. How do we go about feeding the people of Oregon if IP13 were to pass? And then they explain it. So, and I do that for everything except for the very last ones. One was something, I think, let me pull it up real quick. One was like, what's considered an animal under the law. It's the same thing that they have already. Something like a non-human mammal, bird, reptile, amphibian, or fish that's considered Oregon's statute and everything. How what's the italicized and bolded context? That's it. And then the other thing is something about funding for out-of-state billionaires. Are they transparent? So moving on, we'll just go down the list, and if we've got time afterwards, maybe we can throw some political jabs at them, because that's what we tend to do. All right, what is IP13? So they explain it as essentially kind of the generic view of what I already put out there, which is it's based for taking care of the animals, making sure that they are protected and whatnot. The only issue I have with it, and let's see here, let me just pull it up. What is IP13? It's a wide-ranging impact that will make sure that it meets everyone's needs while also taking care of the animals. That's really what the idea is. Well, the issue I have with it was, one particular problem was animal transport, like food and water for the cattle. They said stuff like, you can't do animal transport anymore. Well, what are we supposed to do then? Like that was my thing. So they're gonna remove exemptions from the laws of animals that are protected for abuse, neglect, and sexual assault. But like these are all very umbrella like terms that are trying to essentially criminalize common practices in our industry. So with that, I guess I'll turn it over to Dad, and he can kind of give me his take on what he thinks of it. I don't know if you were able to read the
Yeah, I
site.
was. Yep.
Okay, perfect. So what do you think?
Well, the first thing you have to do is look at what their assumption is. Their assumption is that all animals are being abused, and that the animal cruelty laws of the United States, of the USDA, or the federal laws, as well as each state laws, are being violated. That's their assumption when you read this, that all these animals are under undue types of abuse.
Right.
So, they're again, they come with that basic premise that is a false premise. I mean, there are lots of animal cruelty laws, and there should be.
Agreed.
And the industries as a whole over the last, well, decades really have really improved in animal health. I mean, because it's been shown that the healthier your animal is going to market, the more value they have.
Yep.
Simple as that.
Yeah, so why would you want to send something that is starving or dehydrated? Like, that's not good. Yeah.
No, you don't do that. So what they're doing is they're making an argument they're creating a solution to a problem that doesn't exist.
Well, I mean, it exists in their perspective, and that's the problem.
Perspective is not reality.
Right.
Right. So first of all, that's the very first thing. They're creating something that doesn't necessarily exist. And I'm sure there are some people somewhere doing bad things, because you do find out about them. We just had a case here locally, within 100 miles of here, of a guy that had a bunch of horses, and he was starving them to death, and some cows that were starving to death.
Yeah.
I'm like, you don't do that. There was animal cruelty laws that he wasn't following or avoiding, really just not doing things to cause the statute to be used against you. And they are more than adequate, and it is willful and wanton disregard for an animal's health. So what I saw this initiative as is it's not about animal cruelty. It's about eliminating animal husbandry. Because
I agree. Well, and on top of that, it also, I mean, we'll get to it because we'll go point by point. If you remember seeing those points in the fact sheet or whatever they had, I don't know what it's called. I guess it's a fact sheet, but they also are seeking to remove hunting as well. So it's not just animal husbandry like you're saying, but they're also taking away hunting and like rights.
Hunting, fishing, and trapping. Yeah. What they're really doing, and it says it multiple times in their, and it's not a fact sheet, it's their opinion sheet. It's their opinion bullets. And too bad you can't put that on the screen at a time or here and there. Maybe you will, but
I can't. I think I'll just put it in the link below. And people can look at it, because honestly, with your Wi-Fi, it's gonna mess things up. But yeah, again, we'll go over the bullet points as we go, but just kind of wrap up your point real quick.
Yeah, the overarching message to it is, they say we're not telling people that they can't have these things and can't do these things as long as they don't violate this initiative and these laws. Well, they make the laws so broad and so wide sweeping that you can't possibly have an animal and have them for an animal husbandry type activity, ranching, or hunting, fishing, trapping. You can't possibly do it without violating their initiative or their law changes. So the italicized text in the laws that they propose are taken out, and then the bold, what they want to have put in, are inserted. And there's a lot of bold in there. There's the italicized are very pertinent and very specific about caveats in the law or to that particular point. And then their bold is broadening the law so that it's nearly impossible to do anything. One of the things that they do that's insidious, I think, is that if you do any one of these things in the presence of a child, then that even bolsters and increases the severity of the fines, or the severity of the class of crime. So they'll take it to a felonies. I mean, this is just
that's interesting. I think I missed that.
Yeah, you must have missed that.
Okay. Yeah. Anyway, we'll move on to going down the bullet points. So the one was, how do we go about feeding the people of Oregon if IP13 were to pass? Because that's obviously a concern when it comes to meat production. Not everybody's a vegan or a vegetarian. So those of us that eat meat, how are we going to feed them? So their answer was, many of the people who have written to this campaign are understandably concerned. We are already producing far more food than needed to feed everyone. Oregon is a top ranking producer of many field and seed crops. Okay. Fruits, nuts, vegetables. And the initiative would end up increasing net ag production, depending on how the industry adapts. Because IP13 does not ban any specific industry, does not dictate how industries or government respond to proposed changes in the statute. It is ultimately up to them to do what they feel best meets their needs, as long as it also protects animals' needs. So then my two rebuttals to that was, one, it does not dictate the industry action, but it restricts practices. Like that while
that is a dictation by default.
Yeah, well, that's where like things like remains optimistic for the Oregon economy. I'll be frankly honest, I'm glad you're optimistic, because I'm not. When you put everything, you're in a business model, when you're putting all your eggs in one basket, you're setting yourself up for failure. I mean, everybody always says, not only in your personal investment life or, retirement and stuff like that, but then also in a business model, you want to diversify. You're doing the exact opposite of that. And I think you're setting your own economy up for failure by doing this. That's my opinion. But hey, man, you do you.
Well, here's a couple of assumptions again. False premises. We already produce more food than what we need. Okay, isn't that what we do on our economies for export? You send that food to where it's needed.
GDP, man. Bring up our GDP then.
There you go. The other part of that is they assume that you can grow peas, beans, and lentils and these crops that are non-meat, they're just grains, anywhere in Oregon where cattle, and that's not the case.
Yep. You're forgetting regional ability.
You bet. And your ecology dictates what you can and cannot do. And so,
and Mother Nature. I mean, look at this year. We're in a drought. What happens if a year like this happens? You're looking at potential famine.
Right. The thing about cattle is, just like us, we can bring hay to them.
Yeah.
You can't bring water necessarily to dryland crops. You cannot produce what they need as a sustaining element, meaning water, air, soil, minerals, elements to grow. I mean, there's a, basic, grasslands or basic botany is you need some of the sustaining elements, and it's, you break it down, and it's kind of a elemental saying is Chopkin's Cafe, mighty good. You break that down: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, iron. You have all of these things that you have to have there. You can't necessarily bring that to you can, but if you don't have the water to go with it, you're done. You've got to have water. And some of these areas in Oregon are fairly arid. They're not unlike what we have here. Eastern Oregon, very good country for cattle.
Same with Eastern Washington. I mean, they're in the same region.
Washington. Yep.
You're talking water. I mean, we should have a discussion on water too, because that's a whole nother realm of issues. Like, you're looking at places like Las Vegas. Las Vegas should not exist, but it does because it pulls water from everywhere else. But
Los Angeles, same way.
Yeah. All right. Next point. Would Initiative 13 make hunting, fishing, and trapping illegal? If passed, the initiative would remove the exemption for hunting, fishing, and trapping from our cruelty laws, meaning that any practice that involves the intentional injury of an animal would be criminalized. Again, intentional injury. Although the practice of seeking, pursuing, and in some cases even capturing an animal would still be legally protected, the practice of killing animals would no longer be protected. Though many of those following campaign are concerned about meeting the needs of trying to meet by hunting, blah, blah, blah. Those need to be included: need for food, a need for conservation, a need for recreation. Yeah, these are all very good points for why we need to keep hunting. But those needs can still be met while also meeting the needs of animals to be free from unnecessarily human-caused suffering. Within the state of Oregon, we have ample food, as well as the resources needed to distribute that food to every citizen. There are also a multitude of humane and creative methods for conserving our environment, and in a state as wonderful as Oregon, there are countless activities we can engage in for recreation that does not involve taking the life of an animal it is possible that everyone can get their needs met. So it's a great idea. But my other 2 points are killing for hunting and fishing now it criminalizes you for cruelty. Well, okay, how are you supposed to get your food? We can't find meat now, so how are we supposed to get it? And in total honesty, this sounds like to me, based off of how they're going about not only taking the meat industry out, but then also hunting, fishing, and trapping. This whole initiative, this is where my little like sensors came up. I was like, this to me sounds 100% vegan supported
It is.
and based.
Yeah, me too.
And that's very frustrating because it's like you're trying to force your life onto somebody. It's different to try and protect the animals, but then to force your life on somebody based off of how you think and feel. I just have a very
well, and here's the
foundational
large gap on those points, and that is you have people who don't hunt, don't fish, don't trap. They don't eat meat. They have nothing. They have no knowledge of those industries or activities or recreational activities and what they do. They have no idea what that is because they just don't like it. They don't agree
Yeah.
with it. And if you don't agree with it, I don't care. Don't eat meat.
Well, even if
Good
they
for
don't
you.
agree with it and they don't, it doesn't bother them. It's gonna be more of an incentive to be like, okay, that makes sense to me. I don't do it, so why should I really care?
Well, here's the other part, and that is especially with the animal populations, hunting is not just a recreation. It is. It's an activity. It's how to feed yourself. I mean, there's some life lessons in hunting and fishing, trapping. Now, they don't even discuss or bring up the fact that hunting and the regulations around that are used as management tools
Right. And that's the
to
big part.
manage those populations so they remain a healthy population.
Yeah.
And that is absolutely outside of their scope of we don't want that because we want to be known as those are animals are our friends. Well, you know what? They're also our food.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you need to thin those populations out. That's why you have biologists that do survey counts to see what the carrying capacity in areas are so that you don't overgraze it, you don't have a disease area, because guess what? If they get to be diseased, now you're going to go in there and you're just going to kill them and leave them lay.
Right. Well, and
That
that gets to another part of this initiative that we'll get to. But I mean, there's been studies too. I think it was the 19 teens to 1930s ish, where they took out, the wolves were almost extinct, and they showed, oh, okay, this is great. We're gonna have a massive herds of uh ungulates, deer, elk, all this stuff, and they did for a while. But that regular 10-year cycle came around, and as soon as it peaked, it crashed because of, like you said, disease, not enough food to sustain that population, so famine for the animals, and they died and they suffered. You want to talk about actual suffering? That's some real suffering right there. And then it came back
yeah.
again, but the trends were so astronomically like up and down that once they initiated hunting again and conservation, like actual scientific, hey, this is the population, we need to get it to here, that still happens, but now those waves are significantly less drastic over time.
Sure, they do, and those cycles happen.
Yep.
It's about the amplitude of them and how much you can smooth that out so you have a balanced ecosystem. There is nothing worse than watching something or come across something that's starving to death.
Oh yeah.
That is bad. That is not a good sight. And so their premise there is you can't do anything with them. So what happens when all of those animals start eating their crops?
I mean, that's a
They
good
will.
point too. I didn't think about that. Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
they do. I mean, they're going to go to where the easiest food source is.
Right.
And there's a lot of damage done, game damage by animals on croplands.
Yeah.
Believe me, I've had to help try to manage that or reduce that. Spent significant amount of times trying to do that.
Yeah. Moving on. Could a rancher still raise cattle? So this is more of our spectrum here. Yes, in Initiative Petition 13, it does not ban any industry outright and proposes changes in statute which would not prohibit a rancher from raising and caring for bovine. It would only require that the rancher did not abuse, neglect, or sexually assault the animals under their care. This means that the animals being raised for their meat would have to be processed after they died of natural causes, such as old age. We'll get there. This would certainly increase the cost to raise animals. Don't say. We've talked about this before. Since many are currently killed at a small fraction of their natural lifespan. Yeah. Nevertheless, ranchers can still raise animals if they feel it best meets their needs. if it best meets their needs. If, however, they feel it would better meet their needs for economic security to transition to an alternative agricultural practice, there are programs that can provide financial support to making a transition from farming animals to raising crops. So first of all, that last part, 100% disagree, because now you're forcing people to live off of the government and its handouts. And I 100% foundationally, in my political sense, disagree with that. Moving on though, could a rancher still raise cattle? So only process for meat upon natural death. All right, quickly, issues with that is because, yeah, it does take a long time. We've already talked about the issues we have with keeping heifers for an extra year and the overhead in that. Now you're talking another 10 to 12 years potentially. And what happens if that animal dies of disease? Do you really want to eat that animal? Next spot. We have stated multiple times that we support quick, painless deaths, which ensure a good life up until the absolute very end of that animal's life. That does not change. If you do a good kill, they're not going to feel it. I promise. It will be absolutely instantaneous, and it will not be felt, and they will just die. That is the right way to do it, in my opinion. And then this will effectively end meat production in Oregon, specifically exports. If you're making a lot of money right now and you think you've got more meat or more food than ever, look at, I don't know what it is. This is a legitimate question. Look at your state GDP on export of meat. If that's a large portion of your GDP for agriculture, you just killed your ag industry. But yeah, with that, I'll give it to Dad.
Doesn't Oregon have a coast?
It does.
Does that
You
include
mean like
trapping? You're trapping crab.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
fishing.
You want to talk
I mean,
about suffering for an animal there? Like,
well, I mean, they say they're not taking anybody or targeting any industry. Well, they are. They're targeting them all.
yeah.
Because if you can't follow their statutes, you can't do it. So they're saying, oh yeah, go ahead and do what you want. You can raise them, but then you can't utilize that carcass. We call it, market animal. You can't do that until they're at the end of their life and after they've died. And then you can't use any leather products.
Yeah. Well, hold on a second.
You can't sell them for that.
This does tie to the next point too. Does this ban the sale of meat, leather, or fur? To provide clarity, it does not ban the meat. It just goes on all that stuff. But then it says, after an animal dies of natural causes such as old age, IP13 would not prohibit someone in Oregon from processing their body into meat, leather, or fur for the use of consumption. So those 2 points are kind of, they're together. So that's why I wanted to throw that out there real quick. But yeah, you can use the leather like you're saying, or anything like that. How much of that animal is actually used as a process? No, now almost all of it, hooves, intestines, like all that stuff is used for all sorts of things. Even the blood and the coagulant and the tallow is used for things like Jello. It's just all of that.
I mean,
you lose it, and suddenly you're making these people the enemy of the state.
Well, again, and it is really targeted at putting livestock, and I'm including chickens, whatever, and the taking of wild game. They're making that so that it is not feasible to do it.
Right.
That's the whole point. They're not saying, okay, we're going to ban ranching. What they're saying is, you can ranch, you just can't do this on your ranch. Well,
yeah,
it makes it impossible to do it. Who wants to stand around and wait for a cow to take its final breath because it's of an old age? And I hate to tell you this, but when you get old, you lose muscle tone. You lose everything. You have really essentially very little usable parts out of that animal. And who would want to eat that? That's not.
That was my point too, is, let's say they just all of a sudden, it's just straight old age, no disease, absolutely healthy animal. And, let's say it's a cold winter and suddenly they just freeze to death. Okay. I can accept that. But you're talking muscle tone and stuff like that. I'm not really going to want to eat that because it's going to be tough and gross. But then the other thing too is, okay, what if that animal isn't healthy? And what if it dies of a disease? Do I really want to eat a diseased animal? I mean, people have to deal with that in a third world country, of really considering, do I want to eat this animal? Because it might kill me, but I really need to live. So I'm going to try. Like that's where I start seeing this. And then we talk about managing the ground based off of herd size and stuff like that. your herd size will have to stay the same, and you're creating less money because now suddenly you're only getting, where we can do 100 cows and 100 calves, sell those 100 calves every year. Now we're limited to 100 total head, and only a fraction of that is naturally dying every year. Let's say it's a 10 a year or something like that. You've gone from 100 to 10, and that you've killed that business. Absolutely,
you
killed
can't
it.
sustain it. Yeah, you can't
No.
live off of that.
No.
Here's the other thing that they'll backdoor you on. Mark my words. This is what they would do: is if you had an animal that was diseased, something happened, and now that animal was sick, and you didn't
Lawsuit.
care for it, now you're going to have animal cruelty placed on
Yeah.
top of that because you did not get it to a vet.
Yeah.
You
good
can't do
point.
it yourself. You cannot, under their deal, it is veterinary specific.
Yeah.
Licensed veterinarian. You couldn't give your animal a shot, for instance, of say an antibiotic
Yeah.
to save it, because that is injecting or penetrating that animal with a needle, same as the Paws Act was.
And now that you say that too, what happens if we do we do get backdoored, like you're saying, and you have to care for that animal, and then even after the care they die anyway? You can't use that meat because you've just
Right.
injected it with vaccines
Antibiotic.
or
Right.
antibiotic or something.
Right.
That so many
Yep.
issues. Okay, moving on.
These people
Gosh,
are insidious. They are
so many
absolutely
issues.
insidious. So let me keep going here for a
All right,
minute.
I'll
And
let you.
that is, if you have 100, let's say you have 100 head, how many of those animals die of old age? We don't
That's
know.
what I'm saying. Let's say
because
10.
we don't do that.
A span of 10. No, we don't do that, but we'll just assume 10 a year, roughly.
Okay, but you still can't sell it.
No.
I mean, who's going to buy it? So it's a toehold on that. Now, let's talk about old age and cows. What is it that
Keep going.
causes them to be okay? What is it that causes them to lose weight in their older age? It's their teeth. When you talk about a cow and their condition and how their condition is, and whether what's a predictable thing that you can look at to say, okay, this animal needs to be culled from the herd because they're not going to sustain themselves anymore, it's their teeth. We call them a solid mouth cow, which is a cow that's got all of its teeth. Yeah, they're getting worn, but it is not a cow that's in its prime yet. It's aging. And we use those solid mouth cows. A lot of people buy them in order to start a herd or to maintain a herd of a older status where they can just get into the practice of raising cattle, raise a few cows or calves out of them, 2 or 3, and then as they age, these teeth get worse, they fall out, they get ground down. So essentially what an older animal would do is get to the point where it loses its teeth to the point it cannot eat. And that's true with every animal. You talk about your ungulates, say deer, for instance, deer and elk, they age them. How do they age them? By the wear and the shape of their teeth. Biologists do that all the time. So what you're doing is you're forcing these animals to starve to death before you can utilize them. How cruel is that?
No, I agree. Again,
They have no knowledge of which they speak. They just want an end result.
Yeah, we had a conversation about understanding and talking to people, and hey, why do you do things this way? Well, this is why. I think this is something that I don't think this group is open-minded based off of, I think they're probably pretty well entrenched with organizations such as PETA, but I wish I could come to the table with them and say, hey, here's why, and kind of explain it to them. But unfortunately, I don't think they'll listen. Moving on. Would IP13 affect 4-H? If nobody knows what 4-H is, it's kind of a youth organization for young agricultural kids and stuff like that. It teaches you some responsibility, how to show animals, stuff like that. And then moving on
care
to
for them too, and
care
how to
for
care.
Yeah, and then FFA, or Future Farmers of America. So how would the initiative affect those organizations such as those? Their answer: our need to nurture our kids and help them develop skills to empower themselves and their community is a noble and compassionate desire. Agree. We are assured that we can meet that need. Okay, that's weird. While also meeting our children's needs to be compassionate towards animals and the animals' needs to be safe from avoidable harm. Those organizations already do that. Just as with other industries, IP13 does not ban participation in 4-H programs, provided the program areas are adapted to ensure they are in line with the changes in statute. So I don't know what that means,
I'll tell you what it
except,
means.
well, hold on a second. Yeah, and here's my notes. Supported activities as long as they fall within the line or within the law. And I put in caps, what does that mean? The only thing I can think of, specifically 4-H and FFA, is a lot of the times kids will raise a steer or a sheep and then they'll butcher it at the end of the year and they'll sell that animal to somebody who does that. And that's how they like make their money for the cost of the animal. And they learn that as it's kind of their way of getting introduced to ag business. But that's the only thing I know. What other stuff could they be talking about?
Well, and it's a let's be honest. This is a benevolent donation by someone who purchases their animals,
Right.
because we've done that. I remember one year we purchased a 4-H hog and had it processed, and we paid 3 times more for that hog than what it was
Yeah.
worth, because it was someone's 4-H or FFA project.
Yeah. And
I mean,
trust me, those
that's
kids
the-
get attached to the animal too. It's not just
Oh,
like those kids, a lot of them
they care
ball.
for them. They
Yeah,
truly care for them in every sense of the word. Yeah. Here's what you're not reading, and I see that is like, oh, these are noble causes. You're wrong. You're misguided,
Yeah.
but they're noble and
Yeah.
compassionate.
I see that too.
So
Yeah.
what you can do is you can still get that same nobility and compassion through computer models. We can teach kids how to do this via the
Yeah.
internet.
Through simulations. I could see
This
that
is what
too.
they used to do,
Yeah.
but this is what we do now. And this is why it's wrong. It's a complete twist and turn of the true value and for the intent of what these programs are.
I agree, because especially if you were to do a simulation, I can simulate things all day long and I'm not going to get any emotional attachment to it. But those
Right.
kids also understand, after a year of caring for the animal, making sure they feed it, they water it, they make sure it's healthy. If something happens to it, they doctor it. Like
Right.
doing those things, not only do they learn responsibilities of how to potentially be a parent one day, but then also they get that emotional reaction and they understand that the stuff that's on my plate is it was a living being at one point and I should respect that.
Yes.
Whatever. But
Well, but you can also, you can put in on these programs, and you can put what you want. It's all in the wording. It's how it's presented. This
Right.
is what we used to do. This is what it's about now. We're compassionate because we let these animals live a long life. Don't you want to live? Don't you want to live a long life?
Yeah,
To
no, that's a
a
good point too.
7-8-year-old kid that's in 4-H,
Yeah.
up until their high school age or junior high, wherever they can start FFA. So that is also, it's a manipulation of the programs, and that would, how else would they do that?
Right. No, that's a good point as well. The next point though that they bring out is rodeos. I never rodeoed, but I do enjoy myself a rodeo a time or two. So how does IP13 affect rodeos? As with other industries involving animals, IP13 does not ban rodeos, only the intentional injury, withholding of care, and sexual contact, of animals that are being used in rodeos. This means that rodeos can continue, provided that they adjust their practices in accordance with the proposed changes in statute so that the needs of the animals are being met. We are confident that our need for entertainment can be fully met while also meeting the animals' needs for protection from harm. My notes to this were, oh, this is pretty simple. Adjust practices to conform laws, ? What practices? I don't know of anything where they provide harm to animals. Now, if you're talking about what a common misconception is of taking a male animal such as a bronc or a bull and putting a contraption around their testicles to make them buck, that's a myth. That is
It does not
completely
happen.
made up. You can look at pictures upon pictures upon pictures of a bucking animal, and it is called a flank strap because it goes around their flank, which is a natural reaction to getting claustrophobia, and essentially it's their prey mechanism in their brain going, something's trying to eat me. And yeah, is that exploited to provide it? Yes, but guess what? After 8 seconds, it's released, and it causes no physical harm to them other than pressure. It's like putting a belt on yourself and tightening it really tight, and
Well,
it's
and
for 8 seconds.
then there's an exception to that too. That is generic, and that is I've never seen anybody have a bull or a cow, a serious uh, cow riding. They'll do bull riding,
Yeah,
right? Because these are big, strong,
or
muscular animals, and
steers.
tend to be, yeah. Well, and they do that in like your junior rodeo, things like that. But in your serious rodeos, what most people think of, they use that flank strap. They also, so you don't have cows being ridden in the larger rodeos, what most people think of.
Mm-hmm.
But you do have mares being bucked out, and
Yep.
they also have a flank strap on them
Which
for
are
the same exact purpose.
saddle broncs
Absolutely.
and barebacks. Yeah, exact same. And
Yes.
and it does same sport, same event, just different sex animal with the exact same tool, which is a flank strap. There's
Right.
no balls on on a freaking filly or a mare. I don't know how you make them buck when there's no balls on them. Like you know what
That's
I'm
right.
saying? Like,
Exactly. So yeah, they again, people don't have any idea, and it does not hurt them at all. It just makes them kick
yeah,
out.
yeah.
So
And I had this argument with somebody, a former relationship of mine. I was in the South, and I was told that they torture animals at rodeos. I was like, no, they don't. Where are you getting this information? Well, this person said, it was like, let me pull up a picture for you. And it was a Google search later, flank strap on bucking bull, and you could see his testicles. I was like, is there anything around those two things right there? Like, no. I was like, so why do you think that there's just look up a picture? Man. Okay. Moving
well,
on.
their marketing is good on their argument. Here's what I want to know. If you can't transport an animal, how are you going to get these animals to rodeos?
Yeah. And guess what? A lot of rodeo cowboys and cowgirls come from Oregon. You're about to
I
kill your
know.
rodeo industry too.
Yep.
All right.
Exactly.
Moving on. Would Initiative Petition 13 ban spaying, neutering, or castration? Castration is the livestock version of neutering. Yeah, neutering. Here's the answer. Everyone has a need to protect others we care about. This includes a desire to protect animals from the suffering caused by overpopulation. Okay, except what you don't want to do hunting and fishing. Okay,
Right.
particularly when it comes to our domestic companion animals. Spaying and neutering have become common strategies to meet that need. Such practices, if administered as part of veterinary medicine, as only veterinary medicine, so that would take away from us banning cattle, for example,
Right.
would still be legally protected under the law. IP13 does not limit veterinary practices, does not limit veterinary practices. Again, you're now going, for example, you can no longer do any simple doctoring of your animals without paying a vet to do it. There's no reason to pay a vet, but you're now going to have to do it. Otherwise, you become a criminal. So my point was, this is legally protected, but AI and pregnancy checks are not. So what's AI? Artificial insemination, where you have to put a small tube up a female's vaginal canal and insert semen from either a bull or a stallion to impregnate a mare or a cow. That's considered sexual assault. And then so is a pregnancy check. Like when a vet were to stick their hand up the rectum of a female and use an ultrasound or their hand to feel the uterus and find if there's a fetus or not, that's considered sexual assault. And now suddenly we're touching the reproductive parts of animals and removing them, and that's not sexual assault. But we also want to minimize the overpopulation of our best friends, our little companions, and maybe our big four-legged companions. However, on the same hand, we don't want to overpopulate them because of that, but we won't do it to our our wilderness companions, those that are managing our forests and our wildlands. The hypocrisy is really getting frustrating.
Well, and here's part of that along with that. It says you can't touch any sex organs of an animal. When we banned calves upon birth,
Mm-hmm.
and meaning we put a band around the testicles of a young bull calf, which is the most humane way to neuter them or castrate them, because you're not really castrating them. That's later on where cut them and pull those testicles out. We're not doing that. We are banding them,
which is less
it's
stress.
less stressful on the animal. It's easy to do. It's quick, but you're touching and pulling on that scrotum and pulling the testicles through that band as you've expanded it. You're touching sex organs, and they are calling that a felony. So in some cases it's a misdemeanor, but others it's a felony. And that's where they break this down into numbers. If it's less than 10 animals that you're doing this to, 10 to 40, or 40 or more to 100. And if you do that, if you have your kids with you and you're out banding calves, you're doing it in the presence of a child. Now you are a sexual predator type of law breaker because you're doing it in the presence of a kid.
Yeah.
I mean, these are insidious laws.
Well, and you just brought up that we're just talking about, for example, a bull calf, but we've had issues where a hard delivery of a calf and a cow was milking blood. So we're trying to get the blood out of her, her bag so that she doesn't develop, what is it? Mastitis.
Mastitis.
Right? Yep. Yeah. And so that right there by definition is also a sex organ, and we're trying to take care of her and make sure she's okay. And that's just by us trying to get rid of the bloody milk and everything,
and treat that cow. And so that calf can have nourishment. I mean, there's all kinds of issues around here that these people don't understand, but because of the numbers of what we run, even us, and we're a small ranch, you know, in some terms, well, I guess we're a little over twice the size of the average one, but for our purposes, we're small in comparison to a lot of them in our area. But when you break those numbers down like that, now you're a felon based on the number of animals you have because of the activity in which you have got to care for them. So, they're making it so, and this is just nothing more than another run at animal rights activism. That's all it is.
and
They failed with hunting and fishing and trapping. They've miserably failed at that over the last 40 years. And this is just another run at it in a different way. It's clever. I'll give them that. It's very clever because they're going to make it sound good, and they're going to try to get as many people to sign this petition in this ballot initiative.
Well, it's a good timing too, because people are getting away from beef because they think it's horrible for the environment. Unfortunately.
Again, marketing.
Yeah. Next one. How will the initiative affect Oregon's economy? Economic security is a critically important need for all of us, and we're confident that that need can be met while also meeting the needs of animals to be free from human-caused suffering. The proposed changes to state statute are focused exclusively on removing exemptions to animal cruelty laws. As such, the initiative does not mandate how industries or the government respond to the proposed changes, so long as the changes are being followed. This means that the effect on it's interesting how you guys spell effect and effects differently throughout this whole thing, but just saying, maybe you should get proofreader. Will largely depend on our response. According to the Office of Economic Analysis, is that an Oregon thing or do they make that up? Whatever. The outlook for near-term economic growth is the strongest in decades. Okay.
That may be a firm that they hired to get their desired result.
Maybe. We have strong manufacturing, technology, apparel, and natural resource industries. Oregon can continue to be strong economically without relying on the intentional injury, withholding of care, and sexual contact of animals. A determined soul, this is my favorite part, a determined soul will always manage. And if we are determined to meet everyone's needs, the animals' needs included, we will be able to do so without sacrificing our economic security. So here's my thing. So again, the question was, does this prevent assisting an animal in distress when labor, stuff like that? But a determined soul will always manage. Like you're effectively ending your meat industry in your state, and you're ruining where you're going to have income, where you're going to have export, where you're going to have GDP. But you're talking manufacturing, technology, apparel, natural resources. So it's interesting that you want to exploit natural resources because you are also part of I'm assuming, a political side that does not want to utilize natural resources. So you're still talking manufacturing, which guess what that uses? Natural resources, technology, and apparel. Where does a lot of your apparel come from? So what if you have wool? What if you have leather? Technology. I see, because you're a lot like California. You're banking on technology and your own version of Silicon Valley. Okay. That's only gonna last so long, and it doesn't feed you. That's my biggest thing with that. I you gotta look at how this is really gonna affect your industry. You know what? And if ag is such a minuscule part of your GDP, okay, cool. Give it to the rest of us. We'll take it. Because California, Colorado's killing theirs. Montana right now it's okay, but if we get a different governor, I think it'll start dying quickly as well. But it is.
There's several things that I gotta say here. When they say a what is it, a determined soul will do the
Determined soul.
This is freaking virtue signaling. It's like, oh, if you don't think like this, then you're not a good person. You have a horrible soul. So give me a break. I mean, that's an emotional argument to a problem that doesn't exist.
Yeah, I agree.
Secondly, animals are primarily cattle. Even wool is an argument that, yeah, they can be used for the linen industry. No argument there. However, they don't last forever. They don't live forever. They are still utilized for meat as well. Meat and I mean, they're a dual crop. They're actually a triple crop, because a lot of times you have twins out of sheep. So you get a double crop there plus the wool. Hogs, they're meat. That is their primary function. And then everything that is done off of that is a byproduct of what's left over. And so you get all kinds of things that are made, your leather goods. And just as you talked about before, there's a lot of medicines, a lot of applications for whatever they provide, and other foodstuffs, but primarily meat. So when you talk about where you're going to have these natural resources and these go away, are they going to have to increase the oil industry to make more plastics?
Yeah,
more pleather.
That's where I was getting.
Plastic. Yeah, I know where you're headed, but the hypocrisy of that is you're exactly right. I mean, which one do you want? Because if they can eliminate one, then they'll just work on the other one, which they've already been working on. Yeah. So it's a matter of, you shall live like we want everyone to live, or we're going to throw you in jail for it. We're going to ruin you.
And I should double back real quick to our last part too, because I think this is important. It to me, it helps illustrate the hypocrisy in which I'm getting as frustrated, probably visibly to the viewer, as I am, because I read through this. I was upset about it, because I was like, this is worse than pause. I thought pause was bad. They turned it down, but this is even further. I can't believe they're doing this. I was like, hey, you know what? It's okay. One, it's not your state yet. Two, it's just the start, but this is how you erode the rock, right? Chip by chip. But to kind of show that hypocrisy, what I kind of jumped in there on accident was I forgot to set my notes properly. So the last part where we're talking about the sexual contact of animals and stuff, my other thing was, well, does this prevent in helping an animal in distress while in labor? Because you're touching, vaginal canal and stuff like that. Then also, but here's where the real hypocrisy comes into with me. How often do we AI a pet? I don't know. I would assume some people do, though. They do an artificial insemination for pets. I'd love to see some insight on it, but if we do anything that we do for pets and we apply that and we say, hey, it's okay for pets, but then we turn around and for livestock that we're trying to produce meat for ourselves, all of a sudden we're saying we can't do that. We can do things to ourselves. We can OBGYN. Okay. What happens if you got a lady on the side of the road and a police officer walks up and she's in labor in the back seat? Does he now become a criminal? We have to apply this just like we would for humans. We're talking animals here, but suddenly, oh, let's put it in the human perspective. Now suddenly he became a sexual predator because he assisted her in a birth and to be able to say
save
we
her life maybe and the life of a baby.
potentially, yeah,
Yeah.
but to say, we can do that, we cannot do this to our livestock, but then it's fluffy, that's okay. It's my little buddy that is my one and only companion in life. The hypocrisy between those two and jumping back and forth like that. No, you pick one or you stick with it. If it's sexual contact, it's sexual contact. If you can't do anything veterinary wise for your animal, you can't do anything veterinary wise to your animal. Watch how your economy, coming back to that final point, watch how your economy folds. You're killing some seriously important and infrastructurally sound and foundationally important parts of your economy. You're a Western state. You were at one point a Western state. I don't count the coast as the West anymore. It's a different beast all in itself. But that's how Oregon was founded. That's how Washington, California, everybody west of the Mississippi, that's how they were founded. And you are killing the very thing that initiated your presence in your founding as a state to begin with. But I don't understand it.
This is not about animal cruelty. The animal cruelty laws are there. This is about veganism. This is about the religion of politics and you're going to use climate change. Climate does change. Yeah, no doubt. Always does, always has. But they are using these as arguments for how we got to save ourselves. We're going to all die if we don't do this. No, we're not. Some of us will. All of us are going to die at some point, but just maybe not all together.
Yeah.
So, these are false and they are hyped arguments in order for them to push an agenda. It's for some of them, it's a lifestyle agenda. It is not about really being less cruel to animals or eliminating cruelty, because those animals are already there. And if you'll notice, they are piggybacking their initiative on the animal cruelty laws.
Right. Yeah. Well,
they're trying to make them more a part of it so that they're more broad and more sweeping to affect more and more people in a different area, which is about food production.
Yeah. And I mean, we got less than 10 minutes, but I'll kind of make up the big thing that I think that concerns me. And it goes back to what I stated earlier is it's all timing. You talked about how these organizations were originally, they were against hunting and fishing and trapping for the last 40 years. So they're shifting focus. It's frustrating to me because as a beef producer, we're now at a really bad timing, because this is where we're hitting almost like a three-way front. The Packers, we've said enough about that for now. The Packers, then we've got the protein-based or plant-based protein, is however you want to say it. It's the fake meat is what it is. We've got that. And now we've got in the Western states that are quickly becoming non-Western states, they're popping up with these initiatives and these acts that are against livestock production. And they are doing it in a way to criminalize through primarily emotional response. And it's very frustrating because the Packers, it's an unhealthy thing that has it's peaking to a head, I hope. Again, that's me being optimistic, and I know your perspective on that, Dad. But then there's the plant-based thing, which now technology is enabling us to get to this point where we don't have to produce beef. We can just create it in a lab. And now we're getting this third one, which is the like you said, the religion of politics, where people are trying to throw their lifestyle and their personal choices onto the general population through legislature. And that is where I'm getting really irritated and really upset about it, because it's a three-pronged attack and it may or may not be coordinated. I think it's probably coordinated with plant-based protein, but not necessarily the Packers. The Packers are simply just trying to make money and get out. But there are CEOs like JBS, I think it is, who is behind the plant-based protein as well, which is interesting. So I want to see what his investment is in the plant-based area. Yeah. But it's just very frustrating because we're standing on a hill and we're about to go down with the ship and with our last breath. And I see the end coming if this does not get stopped.
Well, this is a very typical ploy of people who are trying to foist their opinion and their lifestyle on others. If you don't want to have an involvement with meat eating, don't do it.
Right.
but they don't want it. So what we'll do is we'll legislate it. We will
Yeah.
force you to bend to our beliefs. And if this was not something that was sustainable, and it has been, if it was not something that most people want and they do, then the ag industry on the meat side, whether you're raising chickens to cattle to pork, beef, whatever, emu, whatever you've got, would have died long ago. It's about supply and demand. It's about what does somebody want. So they're trying to force that through legislation. And I mean, this is a common ploy on a lot of different things.
Well, and I think to add to your point, to actually to bolster your point, somebody might be watching this if they've watched to the end and they go, well, you guys are forcing your lifestyle on us. Like, no,
Nope.
there's a difference. We're on this channel. First of all, we're only at a little over 100 subscribers. We do not make money off of YouTube. If you want to learn how you make money off of YouTube, please look at it. You have to have at least 1,000 subscribers. We are far from it. And
this is educational.
Yeah, we do
our
this out of the kindness of our heart. Maybe one day we can make some money out of it. That'd be cool, but that's a long ways away. And this is purely to share our lifestyle. People have told us they enjoy seeing some of the videos and the things that we do because it brings back memories, lessons, all sorts of different emotional response.
Or they learn.
Or they do learn. But the thing is, we're trying to get connection with people, share our lifestyle, and educate. And that's why we do this hour-long thing every week, is to educate. And we're not forcing it upon anything. If you want to be a vegan, by all means, man, I support you. If you and I want to go out and have a drink or something, I'll gladly go to a vegan place if you can bring me a burger and I'll sit there and eat with you. Like, I'm going to have meat, but we can also sit down and have drinks together and just enjoy each other's company and be human beings and enjoy one another's company without shoving our lifestyle down other people's throats. And that's what we try to do. We're trying to share. If you want to continue watching, like, comment, and subscribe, but you don't have to sit here and watch it because we're not forcing you to.
2 points I want to make real quick. They say in their bullet points that their funding is not from rich billionaires. How do you know that? They funnel money through straw people constantly, and this has been something that has been a very hard to track. Yet sometimes people are very open about, oh yeah, I support this, and I'm throwing $8 million at this cause.
Or even if Leonardo DiCaprio, for example, big on climate change, he has a huge following. So if he says something, he doesn't even have to necessarily say something, but his followers might be like, hey, I'll throw $100 in. You get a million people do that. All of a sudden you got $100 million too,
Right. Well, again, they do most of that off of emotion. Yeah. One of the things I thought was very interesting, and I may have read this wrong, but it says the one thing that it doesn't affect is the sovereignty of native tribes in Oregon.
Yeah,
as long as they follow, it's the same thing.
And I didn't want to get down that road. I'll be 100% honest, because when it comes to Native American tribes and stuff like that, it is so convoluted. Right. But on this particular sheet, the yes on IP13.org/about, it says the proposed changes to statute IP13 do not impact tribal sovereignty, and laws on land managed by a federally recognized Native American tribe may vary from those of the surrounding area. IP13 does not, however, create new exemptions for our animal cruelty laws for individuals depending on their racial or ethnic background. Our campaign is concerned with meeting the needs of everyone in Oregon and are confident that the needs for sustenance and agricultural security held by Oregonians can be met while also meeting the needs of the animals for safety from human-caused harm. So yeah.
So their very premise on that is discriminatory.
Yeah, I agree. But it's also legally based because they're the different nation.
Discriminatory.
We can go down that route a different time, but yeah, we're gonna wrap this puppy up. So,
okay, everyone, we hope that it made you think a little bit, maybe made you a little bit mad. Is okay. I mean, we don't mean to, but these are issues that we need to focus on and look at and think about, and how it affects you personally, how it affects somebody that you care about. Because just because I like beef doesn't mean that I don't like somebody who doesn't eat beef, because I've got some friends that I dearly love, and you know what? It's okay. We get along great. We tease each other about it, but it's all out of love. It is not about a political stance or a personal belief to foist on others. So with that, we thank you till you're better paid.